Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host of the Leaders with Heart podcast. Today, I have a wonderful gentleman on the podcast. We connected, I would say last fall, but we've been keeping in touch, messaging from time to time. And finally, I reached out to him a few days ago because I kept seeing his name and his post on my feed. But I said, wait a second, that name sounds familiar. And I said, wait a second, have I had them on the podcast yet? I said, no, okay, let's change that. So I invited him. We agreed on the time today. It's Friday, July 15, 6 p.m. Eastern time. And we had a phenomenal conversation for the past almost 45 minutes. Absolutely wonderful, brilliant. I've been blessed over the past 18 months to have connected and talked with over 200, close to 210. This episode is probably going to be episode 208, 209, 210, something along those lines. I haven't stopped counting. But anyways, my wonderful friend here, Pan Vera, beautiful name from New Mexico in the U.S. Wow, what a life. As I said, it's not the number of years in a life, but how much you pack into it. And this man has been absolutely blessed with one of the richest lives I've honestly, I'm not kidding, one of the richest lives I've heard on my podcast so far. Just to summarize, I don't know where to start. So first of all, he's one of the wow. I'm even losing my mind. I can't find the words, but just to say, this man he's made all the he's been married for 46 years with 4 different women, 2 biological kids, 2 stepchildren, and 13 foster children in that time. And with each of these his ex-wives, he spent on average about 10 years. So I was just telling him, my God, Pan, you're sitting on a diamond mine because you have made all the mistakes, and I'm not saying mistake in a bad way, in a good way. You've learned all the lessons, what it takes to succeed in a marriage. And you've been at this game for longer than anyone even longer than Dr. Phil, for example. You could give him a run for his money. Because seriously, you're sitting on a gold mine. I can see you becoming as one of the most sought after and highly paid, marriage counselor, because that is absolutely an invaluable skill, especially someone like you. But anyways, that's just one aspect of what Pan has been doing. We can do an entire, podcast on that. I told him, you and me, we're not going to be just doing a one-off podcast. Probably going to be, we can do an entire library. So just a little bit more about him. His 3rd wife was a Japanese interpreter. Japan is a country that's very dear to my heart. And we're just talking about the incredible manners of the people there. And he was sharing with me how he was, he experienced some of that wonderful Japanese culture and etiquette and all that. And then another wonderful, thing about him is that he traveled, he lived in 17 different places before the age of 19, since his parents were in the military. Both of his parents fought in World War II with the U.S. Army. And he said when Germany surrounded, his father was hired by the Italian government. Wow, we can do an entire show just on that. And then he studied playwriting and theater in college in University of Florida, I believe.
South
Florida, yes. And what a life. And we're only scratching the tip of the iceberg so far, because I'm sure there's so much more. What he's doing currently is doing a wonderful job, because he's a fully heart-centered. We connected on my favorite community in the world, which is the Serving Circle, about September, October of last year, 10 months ago. And so what he's doing now, and that's phenomenal, is one of the things he's doing is involved in an international organization focused on feeding people in case of emergencies and catastrophes. And so much more. His tagline can be summarized, his latest tagline, because again, a man like him cannot have just one. A few years ago, there was a commercial for the most interesting man in the world. I think he should be the new guy to play that role, because he definitely has all the ingredient for that. So his latest tagline is transform your relationship with the most powerful communication tools on earth. So I can say so much more, but I'm just going to stop rambling now and introduce him. Pan, welcome to the show, my friend.
Payman, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. And so far, I really enjoy our conversation. We both have been lit up. We're on fire.
Pleasure's all mine. You know, I'm a very chatty, very passionate guy in nature. And when I started talking to you, really lit a fire in me and made me become alive because you're, my God, you're sitting on, wow, 46 years, 4 wives. My God, that is that is a few books, a library, that is a few PhDs, more than PhDs even, so.
I think I could do a dissertation on each wife because they were all
absolutely
very, very influential in my life.
The lessons learned and all that. Absolutely, you can write a few tomes, each one as big as the what is the British Encyclopedia, whatever it's called, if way back.
Oh yeah, Britannica Encyclopedia.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So, anyways, before we even get into that, so welcome to the show. And how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing really great, even though it's like 94 degrees here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we have very high humidity. So I took my dog out for a walk, and she's probably gonna nap until 6 o'clock or so. Good. Yeah.
All right. So, as I told you before going live, the kinds of conversation I like to have is, sure, we're going to talk about the impact, the business you're building, but what I'm mostly interested in is finding out who's Pan as a human being. Okay. And having a look at under the hood, so to speak, to see what's in your heart, hence the name Leaders with a Heart. Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. So for people who don't know you, tell us, who's Pan as a person, as a human being, first and foremost?
Okay. So without going into my story, Pan Vera is a name I took when I was 57, because when I was 11, I was going to a Roman Catholic school, St. Peter's Elementary in San Antonio, Texas. And one of the nuns that was teaching my class would assign everybody something to do at their desk. And the two of us would go outside on the lanai, and she and I had the most amazing conversations. One conversation, she said, okay, how long do you want to live? And I said, 57 is old enough for anybody.
Hold that thought for a second. That's a wonderful question. I've never heard that. Imagine if we were to go around and asking people, hey, how long do you want to live? Usually that's the kind of question you hear usually in mob movies,
Yeah. But here's another question that she asked me. She said, most men who are famous most men choose one of three paths in life. One is wealth, one is power, and one is fame. And I wasn't so interested in wealth and power, but fame would mean that I had contributed to the world in such a way that I would be remembered. So I chose that one. So now, how long do you want to live? 57. I'm 56 and a half. And 57 isn't very far away. My birth name was John McLean Chamberlain IV.
Wow.
A family that's been in this continent since before the American Revolution.
Beautiful.
So, okay, well, I don't want to die, but I'm willing to give up John McLean Chamberlain IV.
You must have freaked out when that person told you, hey, you have only basically 6 months to go.
Well, no, it was me.
Okay.
It was just my memory.
Okay.
Okay, so I asked the universe for a new name, and eventually something came to me and it said Pan Vera. And you know what I said? I said, that's ridiculous. Forget the whole thing. But it didn't leave me. I came back, I asked for a name, same one came back, and I took it. I didn't realize what I'd done, though, because Pan, besides being the goat-footed god from Greece, means all, like Pan America, pandemic, which we know something about.
Peter Pan, so, no?
Yeah, not Peter Pan. I grew up.
Okay.
Yeah. So there it is, Pan, all. And Vera is the stem of the Latin word veritas, which translates into truth.
Mm-hmm.
So unintentionally, I named myself, or the universe named me, all truth, Pan Vera. It's a little intimidating, Payman.
No, it's very interesting.
That's how I got that name.
So how do people, sorry, it's so fascinating. I mean, your story is so fascinating. We will do a few episodes together. So when you introduce yourself as Pan Vera, what is the first reaction of people? Because that's quite a unique name.
They say, uh,
Excuse me?
is it Pan or Pon? They say that's
Pam? No, not Pam.
I get a lot of Pams. I type in Pan, it comes back Pam, and I get everyone, all the marketing email is for makeup and stuff like that. So I'd like to tell you, though, who I am started out to get me where I am now. And I'm in my crib. I'm still that young in a crib.
Mm-hmm.
And one night, I'm aware of the fact that I'm aware of that space where the two halves of our tongue come together.
Wow.
It's tingling. It's tingling. And I'm realizing that I'm noticing it's tingling. That was my first conscious thought.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, I hear myself say to what appears to me at the time to be some kind of non-corporeal committee, but you said I could come back if I didn't like it here.
Mm-hmm.
And then this voice, which I now recognize as my soul, but of course I have no idea what it was when I was 17 or 18 months, said, what's going on? And I don't remember telling him what was going on, but I guess he knew. And he said, okay, I'll talk to him. And I'm back to my tongue for a while. And then I noticed the crinkle of the crib. And, wow, self-awareness. He comes back and he says, yeah, you can come back just like they promised, but they only have one request before you do. Would you remember why you came here in the first place?
Whoa.
Now, Payman, you can imagine as I grew older, put that on Do Not Disturb, I began to doubt that that could possibly have happened. You know, how likely is it that something like that could happen? I'm looking for Do Not Disturb. So 40 years later, I'm traveling into Texas where my older sister lives. I hadn't seen her in 20 years. So we stay up all night. And in the middle of the night somewhere, she turns to me and she gets this very serious look on her face. And she says, Johnny, when you were really young, I did something I have never forgiven myself for. What's that, Molly? You were dying. And I got out of my bed and went over to your crib and said, Johnny, don't die. I want to play with you.
Whoa.
So that's kind of how I started.
So was that an NDE or not a near-death experience?
Yes, it was. Yeah, I later figured out what was going on.
Okay.
My mother was a chain smoker. So was my father. They were the kind of smokers that even if they didn't want to smoke, they had a cigarette lit. Okay. I'm allergic to tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
And I have weak lungs. So I was dying of pneumonia.
Wow. How
Yeah,
old
of
were
course,
you again at that time again?
18 months.
Oh, wow.
No, less than that. It has to
Wow.
be less than that because I'm still in my crib. My brother isn't born. He was born 2 years after I was.
Mm-hmm.
So, so when one of my baby sister's first memories in her life was standing out on the porch. We were in this house where there was a wraparound porch and it was about 8 feet off the ground. And she said, you and the kids in the neighborhood would come and sit in this little place that's kind of private. And I would be giving them advice about how to deal with their brothers and sisters. I was giving them empathy and not, you know, I'm like, what, maybe 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old, 7, something like that. So I've always been a very empathic person. And later on discovered I was a Heyoka Empath.
Wow.
With all respect to the Lakota tribe created that term. And it's defined as like the top 1% of empaths, which means I can sense people's emotions and
Wow.
I can hear their emotions, feel their emotions, and send them down into the earth. They can travel through me without sticking to me. I ground out, and they can then get out of their stuck in emotions experience and go forward in their life.
So can you do that with someone that you're physically in the presence, or can you also do that virtually? Like, for example, can you sense my energy virtually?
Yes. Yes. And a lot of it is just, since I move so often, you mentioned that. Um, we'll talk more about that a little bit. But what moving around means you're never from around here.
Yes,
So you get
absolutely.
into a new environment and you know it's a new environment. And jokes that were hysterically funny in Oklahoma were totally not appreciated in Wisconsin, and
Sure.
things like that. So you pay attention. I paid attention to people's facial expressions, how they moved, and to what was coming through my mirror neurons.
Hmm.
And so I did, because it's fascinating. It's just fascinating. So things came to a head when I met Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. We're skipping forward, and we can come back and talk with some of my earlier years too. But Marshall Rosenberg was the creator of nonviolent communication.
Okay.
And when I met him in 2001, in 5 minutes, I knew he had the best tool for peace I had ever come across. And knowing that when I was in Ireland and the Cuban Missile Crisis came up, and the missiles came up out of the ground where my family was, peace is not theoretical. It's very, very, very real. So I jumped into it and discovered that the heart of it is compassion,
Hmm.
compassion and empathy. And hey, I do compassion and empathy. So that started my journey, which is now year 18. And that's kind of what I do now.
Wow. Powerful.
Yeah. But let's go back to those earlier days.
Sure. The question I asked you was, in a nutshell, was we're going to talk about diving deeper into your story later on. That
Okay.
question was, in a nutshell, let's say someone meets you and say, okay, wants to know who's Pan as a human being first and foremost, and a few sentences. What would you say
Okay.
to let someone, the people who don't know you, get to know you? We're gonna dive deeper into your story later on in this
You bet.
podcast.
Okay.
Yeah,
I would say, first of all, I am an honest, worthy, and accepting man.
beautiful.
And I look at this big chart I created
Wow.
years ago when I had to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's me. And I'm a person with lots of experiences. So I'm very open to people. I'm not fixed in my ego because I never grew up around this is the way things are, because
Oh
I grew up
yes.
around where this is different from where I've ever been before. And that gives me the ability to just listen to what people have to say without judgment or blame or shame or criticism or diagnosing or wanting to fix them. So I'm a person who can listen to you so you can hear yourself. On other levels, I'm a person who loves nature. My favorite jobs outside of my of being an elementary school teacher were planting trees and fighting forest fires in the Cascade Mountains, where my body was so fit that my idea of a weekend vacation was to hike up on top of Mount Baker, like 17,000 feet, and walk on the
Wow.
glaciers. I wish my legs are still capable of doing that, but the rest of me, not so much. I'm a person who loves deeply and intimately, very caring, very open heart. I'm just thinking about my first heartbreak.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, we're living, we're parked in a trailer camp. But this time my father was out of the army. He gets back in when Korea comes up. And he's what's called, what he does is he, people go around with seismic machines and discover geology that could contain oil.
Mm-hmm.
Then other people come in and they do a core drill. So they drill down, they bring up this pipe that has essentially a slice of all the layers that are there.
Mm-hmm.
And then he looks through to see if oil is there or likely to be there. And then he goes to the next one. So we were moving every few months. And I had made friends with another 2-year-old, probably 2 or 3, somewhere in there. Must be 2. And I'm looking out the back of the trailer that we're driving away in from mobile home and seeing her disappear and feeling that sense of heartbreak. And what I grew to learn, I don't know if it happened then, but when, especially when I was a teenager moving around, that to love is to lose, and it's worth it.
Absolutely. Wow. Beautiful. So much we can cover, and we'll explore. We will do that later on. Now, to further get to know you as a person, I'm going to ask you a series of rapid fire questions to
Okay.
further get to know you as a person. First of all, tell us what makes you happy as a person.
The happiest I get with a person is when they come to me and they don't know what to do, and they're so angry, and they're making their relationships worse. And I can talk to them and ask them a few questions and reframe some of the things that they have to say, and they walk away filled with love.
Beautiful. Now, what makes you smile?
My dog.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. What kind of dog is
uh,
it?
oh, she's a spaniel mix. It's a real
Mm,
sweetheart.
beautiful.
Um, my own cooking.
Oh, yes.
I love to cook. I never follow a recipe.
Create
And
your own. Yes. My
oh
style too.
yeah, yeah. And I share my food with people and they say, oh, what's the recipe? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Really.
You want a recipe? Come
Yeah.
here and taste it. You tell me.
Yeah, right, right. What else makes me smile? Oh, watching kids play.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have grandfather-itis. So when I
Okay.
see little bitty kids in the park that's across the street from me, I just love seeing them. They're so innocent and sweet.
Do you have any grandkids?
Uh, no, sadly,
All right.
I have, I have, I have people in my life that I consider grandchildren.
That's beautiful. Now, let's take the happiness factor a couple of notches higher. What makes your heart come alive? What makes your soul set your soul on fire in a good way?
Right now, it's my spiritual path.
Mm,
Um, so I've always been a very spiritually inclined person. I studied to be a Jesuit. I became a pagan priest. I did this. I did that. I went through many, many levels of transcendental meditation, getting closer and closer to spirit, and that's really what my life is all about.
beautiful.
So now I'm on what's called the master path. When I first heard about it, oh, is this a path where you follow some kind of master? I'm not going to do that. Well, it turns out this is the path where you find that you are your master, and how to connect with your soul,
Mm-hmm.
and how to get out of body consciousness.
Yes, indeed. Wow.
So
That's beautiful. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, what makes you
mhm.
sad and angry?
It's been too long since anger. I used to be very prone to anger, but
Mm,
when I learned that, I learned a couple things from Marshall Rosenberg. The first thing I learned is nobody can make you feel anything. You make me feel so bad. No, that's not true. Something I value about life
mm-hmm.
wasn't happening. And that's what made me mad. And then underneath that madness, there's something else. There's loneliness, there's disgust, there's fear. And if I can really catch on to the feeling that's underneath anger, then that will lead me to a recognition of what it is about life that I'm mourning, that I'm not experiencing in a way that I want.
Mm-hmm.
And when I know what that need is, then I can make requests to myself or other people to get that need met. Not that other people are going to meet my need, but sometimes, my need is for company, so I can ask somebody to spend some time with me. So what's that? Other things that kind of really irritate me is, I'll just say this. Because of my family and also because of me, politics has always been really important. And truth has been really important.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was getting to the point where I was reading newspapers, we were living in Europe and we had a subscription to the New York Times. And it was so, I just loved reading it. It was just fact after fact after fact. And now when I pay attention to the news, it's opinion after opinion after opinion.
I
And that's
agree.
crazy making. The other thing is, oh, well, you have your facts and I have my facts. Nothing is going to work if we can't agree on the basic issue of what has happened. And I'm really frightened now that we, as in the United States, are on the brink of losing our democracy.
Same thing in Canada. Same thing in most of the Western world.
Yeah, they just came out with a study. There's been a study been going on since the 70s where they rank from +7 to -7 for degree of democracy in a country. So -10 right now is North Korea.
Wow.
We used to be 10 year after year after year. The Payman right now we're 5.
Wow.
And the recent Supreme Court cases have been a major part of that. The division of political parties. I just can't even believe what's happening to the Republican Party. Neither can my brother, he's a lifelong Republican. And it gets back to not having a reliable news source and not having a sense of trust of each other.
Yeah, that's what is lost. People have lost all trust in the mainstream media. I haven't watched the news in 5 years. A lot of time I have still my friends, I used to live in Hong Kong, they're messaging me, hey, did you see what's happening in Canada? I say, I don't know and I don't give a damn. Sometimes they are telling me what's happening. Because I'd rather focus my time on things I can control, not things that's going to make me upset and pissed off and things I have no control.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, yeah.
It's going to make me furious.
I think your decision.
Yeah,
I think your decision is very good for your mental health.
Absolutely, absolutely. A wise man once told me, if something is important, you will know about it.
That's true.
So you don't need to be glued to TV 10 hours a day.
Yeah, that's for sure. But here's one thing I'd like to put out there too, Payman. When my father was stationed in Germany, he was a sub-post commander of a base, a military fort, or whatever we called it then. And he and my mother would spend a lot of time with the local politicians. And they asked the question, how did Hitler come to power? And they said, well, we stopped paying attention to the news. So all these things were happening and we weren't paying attention. So we didn't do anything about it. So somewhere there's a middle ground.
Yes, indeed. Yes, that goes way deeper than that. For me, it's because I've been living abroad for so long. And when I came back, I don't recognize this country. This country has been going down the drain. It's being destroyed by the political class, the incompetent fools we have,
I do.
So
I also think that we're both in a great deal of trouble because of the economic divide.
Yes.
It's as bad. It's worse now than it was in the 30s when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was swept to power.
Yeah.
And the problem was this huge disparity between the rich and the poor. And I just ordered a book called something along the lines of what does it take to create a civil war?
Wow.
And one of the things that it said in the promotion for the book is when there's a huge disparity between the rich and the poor and when housing is not available.
That's what's happening in Canada right now. It's extremely expensive to buy even a semi-detached, like 50 kilometers outside of Toronto is like $1.5 million.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's absurd. Vancouver, same thing. Montreal, Toronto is completely crazy. Even renting. I know a friend of mine is renting a studio for like $3,000 a month.
Isn't that insane?
Mine is Canadian dollars, which is about 25% cheaper than US, but still, that's a tidy sum of money. Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
relative to what you're probably getting paid.
Look at what's happening in Sri Lanka right now. It's sad. It's very sad.
Yeah, it is.
All of that could have been easily avoided, but the greed of a few, that's what's been destroying that country. And now, if we don't do something about that, what's happening in Sri Lanka could very easily happen in Canada and the US.
Yeah.
Especially in the US, it's crazy because there's such a massive divide between the left and the right, and then this and this and that. It's absolutely, there's especially the racial aspect of that. It's absolutely like a ticking bomb right now in the US.
I agree.
It's so sad because such a beautiful country, so much incredible talent.
I know.
Some of the
I
smartest people
know.
in the world, some of the kindest, some of the most, I've been blessed to have lived in 10 countries, 4 continents. Some of the most amazing, generous, kindest people I've met have been Americans.
Well, that's good to hear.
At least the ones you meet abroad may be different than the one you meet, around you. Yes, I can say the same
Yeah,
about Canadians, but
yeah. All I know is that history is a pendulum, and we got to be at the top of this side.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll swing back to a world of compassion and
Yeah.
There's a great term for capitalism that I think Bill Gates came up with it, but it's basically capitalism with the soul.
I love that. And I have something similar like that I call it doing business the God's way.
I love that.
For example, sure, we all need to make money, but let's do so in a way that is meaningful, impactful, and purposeful. For me to win, it doesn't mean for you to lose. For me to win,
it's just the opposite.
If me and you win together, our business will be so much more meaningful, lasting, and powerful and beautiful than if for me, I was to just, so to speak, screw you, That if I were to screw you, we would never do business again. And you would,
right.
But if I do business in a way that I win and you win,
yep,
everybody's gonna win, and that's what I call business with a heart, or doing business the heart, the God's way. And you mentioned also capitalism with a soul. I love that. I'm gonna write this down.
So Payman, you mentioned the serving circle.
Yes,
and that is what I love about those people. Most of them, what would you say, 30s to 50s? Most of them,
all ages, yes, mostly 30 to 50s.
Most of them, and that generation, they just want to serve to a person.
Yes,
that is the most important thing to them, and that's the kind of consciousness that I hope is evolving on our planet right now. Otherwise, Gaia is going to shove us off and replace us with something else.
Yeah, just wash it off.
Another years from now, they'll be burning you flesh.
Another flood, and oops, flushed away.
Yeah.
Wow, powerful. Listen, this is amazing, and we haven't even started. One last question I want to ask you about the so-called, rapid fire series. That was probably the longest rapid fire series I've ever had. That's beautiful. So, what would you say is your number one personal superpower?
Empathy.
Oh yes.
Yeah. It's I thought I'd like to say something about it, but I'm kind of lost for words. For me, empathy is being able to listen with an open heart. Being able to listen to not the words as much as to the feelings and needs that a person is experiencing. Being able to ask them questions about what feelings and what needs they have, so they can discover for themselves what's going on with them. And then teaching them the fine art of request.
Beautiful.
I'm lonely. Okay. So what am I going to do? I can moan because I'm lonely, or I can say, why don't I call up Danielle and see if we can get together and take a hike with your 2 young boys who I consider to be my grandsons. Oh, I'll do that. And it's just that transition from hard emotion, recognized emotion, recognized need, ability to take action and have choice. It's magic.
Absolutely. Wow.
Oh, and it's also very easy. It's so much easier than what I did before.
Absolutely. Wow. Beautiful. Yes. Now, let's move forward. Now, I'd like to take you on a trip down memory lane. Remember when we were kids, people around us, friends, family, relatives, teachers, they'll always ask us, so back then your name was John, right?
Right.
So, John, what do you want to become when you grow up? What was your answer as a young boy back then?
An Army officer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I remember saying to an elderly woman, we called her grandma, but she wasn't really a grandma. And I remember she was talking about dying, and I was saying, well, when I get there, you'll find me in God's army.
Oh, wow. Whoa. Really? You said that?
That was my imagination, you know. I'm telling her
God.
that she's going to find me. I'm like maybe 7 or 8, and she's probably in her 80s or something. But yeah, I always was very okay.
That's
That was the answer
beautiful.
to that question.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I have a feeling. No, I don't have a feeling. Sorry. I know for a fact that you may be a star seed, given all that I heard from you, the empathy and all that. And mentioned two things that really stood out. So for one, capitalism with a soul, absolutely love it. And then saying, I will be there with God's army. That's especially at that age. I mean, how many kids do you know? How old were you back then? Maybe what, 5, 6, 7, 8?
Somewhere probably less than 8, but older than
Yeah.
5.
How many kids you know that age that can say things like that? Wow.
I don't know.
Yeah. Wow.
No.
Anyways, now let's move a little bit, stay when you were a kid. Growing up, what was your relationship with school? Did you love school or hate school?
No, I kind of liked school. I liked learning. I was a B average student, but I had a very curious mind, and I just loved learning. There were challenges in that. I remember taking an IQ test where you have this 2-dimensional drawing of a shape, and somewhere you're supposed to guess what it looks like when you fold everything together. I can't do that at all. I got a bookshelf sent here, and I looked at the instructions to build it. It took me 3 hours to give up and ask my neighbor to come over.
I'm the
It
same.
took them to about 2 minutes to say, "Oh, we do this and this." And
I'm the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was the question?
The question was, wait, what was the question again? No, what was your relationship with school? And you answered saying
yeah.
you loved learning and
Yeah. So when we were living in Germany, the high school, the American high school, was a 2-hour bus trip each way.
Wow.
And my mother, whose parents came from County Cork in Ireland, said, "No, I'm going to send them back to the old country." So I went to school on the West Coast, very near the Shannon Airport, actually. And I was at a place called Mungrick College. And I stayed in the in the new wing. The new wing was 800 years old.
Whoa.
The college had been built by the Druids long before St. Patrick showed up there. As a matter of fact, the Druids kept higher education alive, not only in Ireland and England, but in Germany, all across Europe. They were avid scholars.
Wow.
So that was just so much fun to be there, in part because languages were a big deal. So I had learned German. I had classes in Heilbronn where we lived, but I went downtown and hung out in the children's toy store and listened to the adults talk to their kids. Then I went to this school and I learned Latin and French. So I could read Cicero and what's the guy, Caesar. And I read this amazing novel about a French Canadian Mountie in French. It was so cool. And so I discovered that if I were thinking about a particular topic, there was a language for that.
Wow.
Unfortunately, about a year after we came back from Europe, it all got a jumble. But yeah,
Do you speak those languages?
Wir sprechen sie ein bisschen Deutsch, and that's about all. And that was German. I speak a little German.
How about French?
Je n'ai pas.
On peut parler parce que moi j'ai grandi en France. I grew up in France. French is my first language.
I was trying to find your initial language. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my first language. I grew up in France. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
I love French. You know, the main thing I love about French is they don't have the verb to be. It's marcher, which means to move or to go.
No, le verbe de be is être, le verbe être. We have the verb être.
Oh, okay. I'm just misled.
No, the verb être, actually.
I'm heartbroken.
The verb être. No, we do have it. We do have it, yes. No,
okay.
The verb être, to be, yes. Marcher is walking. And marcher has two meanings. One, to walk, and two, for something to function. to work.
Yeah, that's
Ça
what I was
marche?
thinking about.
Does it work? Yes.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
French is much more complicated. It's one of the most complex Western languages. Even as a lot of French first native speakers still cannot speak it properly because it's very, usually of the rules and the exceptions. French is probably one of the only languages there's more exception than rules. If you know what I mean. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
gotcha.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So wow. So what was your favorite subject growing up in school?
Pick a favorite. I think I had the most fun in chemistry classes.
Oh yeah. Blowing up
Literature.
things?
No, not so much. Though we did, we were doing an experiment with phosphorus, tube with phosphorus, and the teacher was holding it and it touched some other chemical and it went up in flames. That was as dangerous as it got. But I just liked seeing things change and trying to understand what later on in school. I was, they had a guy come down from McGill University, which I think is not too far from where you live.
McGill, that's in Montreal.
Okay.
Yeah, so, it's like 500 kilometers from here, east of Toronto. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So anyway, this guy came down and he had tinker toys, and he used them. So one would be the nucleus, and then he would have other ones of various different lengths that were the electrons. And then he would put the two of them together to create a molecule. And I just thought that was so fabulous. It wasn't really a molecule, of course, but it gave me the mental idea, which turns out to be not quite accurate. But hey, this was back in the 60s. So.
Was there any subject in school that you did not like at all, that you couldn't stand?
I really wasn't very good at arithmetic.
Yes,
I loved algebra, and geometry couldn't handle. Once again, that visual kind of thing. I could do the basics, but nothing really sophisticated.
Okay, wow. What was your very first job?
My very first job was on this base that we were in. There were apartment buildings. Most of the people lived in apartment buildings, and the apartment building, they would hire somebody to be responsible for watering and mowing the lawn and digging the weeds and stuff like that. So I had a job at one of those. And what I really loved about it was I struck up a relationship with a young couple that were in the military version of the CIA. And they would invite me up for a glass of cold water, and they would tell me about all the dirty tricks they could do. Wow. Which of course was fascinating.
Oh yeah. I'm sure you must have some amazing stories from that, eh? Wow.
No, it was fun being there.
So you mentioned living in 17 places in the first 19 years.
Yeah.
What were some of those places?
So I was born. When I was born, we were living in Sweetwater. I was born in.
Were you born in the US or in Europe?
Oh no, I was only in Europe for about 4 years.
Okay. Yeah. How old were you when your parents moved to Europe?
It's so long ago. I'm 74, but I think I was. I know I was like 15 when I came back. So
okay,
probably 11.
Okay, wow.
I'm not very good at math, so you know how to add. You might correct me on that. But,
what was your favorite place among those 17 places that you spent in those years?
Probably my favorite place was Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas.
Why?
Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, we were in this huge house that had been built by the Confederates during the Civil War. Wow. And it was a mansion. It had 5 bedrooms. It had a little apartment for the maid. And so for 5 kids to rattle around in there was really quite a bit of fun. But the best part of it is right behind us was this huge field that went all the way around the base. And it was probably maybe 400 feet deep. So all summer long, that's where all the kids in the neighborhood were. Away from our parents, away from their prying eyes, just hanging out, building swings, putting on skits and plays. It was the kind of freedom
Mhm.
that was so wonderful because you were both safe and nobody was looking over your shoulder.
Yeah.
That was fun.
You know, you mentioned San Antonio is one of the cities in the US I want to visit the most because I grew up as a big Spurs fans. Even though I've never been there,
Ah,
San Antonio Spurs, you know, that was my team since I grew up,
oh, cool.
since the days of David Robinson, the Admiral, and all that. And when all the other kids around me were about, you know, following Jordan or Magic or
Yeah.
Barkley, for me, it was the Admiral.
All
You know,
right.
I just love this muscle, almost like a man crush on him because I was like 10 years old, whatever kid back in 91, 92. Back then,
Uh-huh.
there was no internet. Growing up in the south of
Yeah.
France, this guy was a basketball player, tall guy, French guy. He had like a magazine, French magazine about basketball, showing the
Uh-huh.
best players in the NBA. He gave it to us to read it, and for me, I was just awestruck by the muscle, the perfection of the way he was physically as a man. Because at the
Uh-huh.
time, I was trying to play football, soccer, and the
Yeah.
way I saw him, like, wow, this is what I want to look like. You know,
Right. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
wow, amazing. So now let's move forward from the time you left school. You left, came back to the U.S. after all those
Uh-huh.
time, came back to school. Let's talk about your path from the time you left school to now. How would you describe your path? Would you say it was pretty much straightforward? Once you get into one lane, one career, it was smooth forward, or was it like more turns and twists, like a roller coaster?
Well, let me tell you.
That could be that
Okay.
episode just by itself. I know.
Yeah. So after I decided I didn't want to be a Jesuit priest, which is what I decided when
Wow.
I graduated from high school, I went to the University of South Florida because I had written a play with another fellow,
Hmm.
and I decided I would study playwriting. And so I did. And I wrote a couple plays, had them produced,
Wow.
and I looked at them and I thought, they're entertaining enough, but there's no wisdom in them. So I took a vow that I would go out into the world and have as many different experiences as I possibly could,
Beautiful.
so that in my old age, I would be able to write with authenticity about all kinds of different people.
Hmm.
So by deliberate plan, it was a ricochet life. Many experiences, many lines of work, and yeah, just an enormous richness of life experience.
Absolutely. It's amazing that you understood that at a quite a young age. Most people don't even realize that at all. So, what made you realize that? Was it a specific event? Was it something like a progressive
So
awakening along the way? Or you always knew that, hey, there's something more to life than just one thing?
the latter, it's an interesting question because I hadn't really thought about it, but based on where I am in my spiritual path now, I think I had a connection to my soul.
Mm-hmm.
I had a therapist who said that I had an uncommonly deep connection with my sub and unconscious mind.
Whoa.
So I've always known that we're here temporarily and that it's kind of a mirage
Mm-hmm.
as far as what's real and eternal. And and so I don't know what that's as well as I can answer that question.
It's
But
perfect. There's no,
self reflection has just been part of it.
I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. It's a great answer the way you answered it. Yeah, absolutely. Now, there is a saying, I'm sure you heard it, that says, change your story, change your life.
Uh-huh.
When you, Pan, or John Pan, when you had to change your story at a moment to change your life, how did you do it? Did you do it to help a friends, family, books, videos, mentors. Tell us the process you use to change your story. And by story, I mean what we tell ourselves all day long in our head. How did you do it?
Wow. In a way, I don't know, but things, I think, Payman, now that I'm thinking about it, it's just a belief that everything that happens to me is happening for a reason.
So you just surrendered to it and trusted the process, you knowing that the universe will guide you?
Knowing that I'll learn.
Mm,
It's that addiction to learning.
wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That is powerful.
Yeah, when you move around from place to place, what I realized, because I didn't know any difference,
Mhm.
but what I realized was that you have a very flexible attitude about who you are.
That was but one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and
Yeah.
you answered before you even asked you was, you growing up in an environment where you had to move 17 times in 19 years. What what did you learn through that? What is the main lesson from that? And you answered that. So beautiful.
Okay. So the first thing that I learned was also very young. At the time, my father is spending 2 or 3 months in an oil field looking at the core
Right.
to try to figure out whether oil might be located there. So we stayed in places very briefly.
Mhm.
And I had made friends with a little girl my age, and we were quite fond of each other. And then it was time to move.
Mm.
And I was in the back of this mobile home or trailer or whatever it was that we were in, and looking at her disappear in the distance and feeling a bit of heartbreak,
Sure.
but then making a decision that it was worth it. It was worth it to love, even if I was going to lose. So I've never been one to hide my heart. And
Wow.
maybe that's why I had 4 10-year plus marriages.
We'll
With
get into
4,
that in a moment because that's an
yeah.
entire podcast on itself.
Okay.
But I can relate to that because I've been in that situation many times, being me a nomad, living in many places, first growing
Mhm.
up, and then as a result of my lifestyle, I can totally relate with that. And that's just like you said, it makes you very open to things, very
Yeah.
open-minded, very ready. You know that you do not need to overthink things, just
Yeah.
go with the flow. If you feel
Yeah.
right and if there's a connection, go for it, make it happen, make the most of every moment,
Yeah.
because that moment can end. And by end, I don't mean just because the tragic way of dying, but you be moving on and another chapter opens. So speaking of that, one question, the next part of that question I wanted to ask you was, the first part was, what was the lesson for you to learn through moving so much growing up? And second of all, and again, we answered that in a way, how did that prepare you for what was next for you? Because everything in life happens to prepare you
Yeah.
for what's coming next.
That's right. So there's so many steps.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, it's a challenging question. I guess it just prepared me to be where I am now.
Absolutely.
And and to be able to, my passion in life right now has been for quite a few years now, is to help people find peace
Mm-hmm.
through a language of heart connection. And it's a very simple process called NVC. It's very difficult to stop doing what you've done in the past. So because I changed as I went from culture to culture to culture, that wasn't so challenging for me. Um, and so now I live in the moment. When people come to me and they say, this thing happened in the past, do we need to go back and drudge it up? No, we don't need to go back and drudge it up at all. It's not going to help anything. Just how do you feel about it now? Because there's no healing of the past.
Mm-hmm.
Healing only takes place in the present. Um, So the fact that I was a natural born empath definitely contributed to my ability to be this language. The fact that I was always curious about people because there wasn't really much of the same old going on, predisposes me to be very curious about people. The fact that I didn't have a set of unwritten rules that persisted for a long period of time means I'm very flexible and empathic with everybody, with people that I meet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So you being married 4 times, 4 women, 46 years.
Mhm.
What lesson have you learned from marriage? Looking back at this almost half a century of living with a woman, what is
Yeah.
the less? What is the main thing you learned about marriage?
So the main thing I learned about marriage is that you have to be there.
Mm,
So when I look at why I'm not married to those women, with the exception of one, it was because I became such a workaholic.
oh, I see.
I always did work that I loved doing, and it always meant a lot to me,
Mm-hmm.
which meant that I wasn't really as available to my partners as they would have liked.
Sure.
The other thing that I learned is never argue about who's right and who's wrong.
Bingo.
Banish those words from your being. They are destructive. You'd be better off drinking rat poison. So throw out right, wrong.
And that
Uh,
applies to any relationship, not just marriage, friendship,
oh, absolutely.
business, any
Yeah,
marriage.
yeah,
Sorry, any
yeah,
relationship. Yes.
yeah. The other thing I learned that's very important is even if there were only two of you in a room doing the same thing at the same time, you each have a different experience.
Absolutely.
So most of the couples that come to me looking for help are arguing about what somebody said or did.
Mm.
There was a study that was done by the American Legal Association, I think it was way back in the 60s or 70s, and they put 700 people in an auditorium. They had hired an actor who came in and did a little one-man skit, walked off the stage and asked people to write down what they saw. They collected the answers. They asked them to come back the next day. They collected the answers. They asked them to fill out a form once a year for 20 years. They went back over the answers. First of all, the very first day, people wrote down 2 minutes after it happened. There was a wide description of what had happened. And the next thing that was fascinating about it is at one time they remembered it one way. A number of years later, they remembered it just the opposite. So this idea of trying to figure out who said what when is a total waste of time. It's
Totally.
not important, and you're never going to get agreement on it. Why is that? It's that because we listen and experience based on our genetics, based on our life experiences, based on our last meal. We are not constant.
Our
We
current
are
mood.
constant. Yeah, exactly. So, so that's just really valuable. If you want happiness, live in the now, and
Oh,
don't believe
yes.
anything. You don't believe anything you believe.
You know, I was watching a documentary saying that animals, for example, they have no notions of future or past. They only live in the moment right now. We're the only species probably that has a notion of something that doesn't even exist, which is time, doesn't exist in a higher level because everything happens at the same time. There's no
Do you
past,
hear
no
that,
present.
Athena? Do you hear that?
There's no. So
I don't
that
think
is very
that's true.
fascinating. Yeah.
Payman, I don't think it's true. My dog reads time.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
she not by the clock, but by the sun. So, for example, I feed her dinner at 6 o'clock.
But is it not like a result of habit? For example, if you leave a dog from the moment he or she is born in nature, they would behave differently because they've been raised in a human, environment. So they subconsciously they try to adopt some of our ways of living, because especially
I
if you
think
live at
so.
your
Yeah.
house, you
Yeah.
wake up at certain time, you eat at certain
Yeah.
time, you go back to bed at the same time.
Yeah.
You have to follow that. You take him for a walk at a certain time. So it's building habits for them.
Okay. So maybe they're just being stimulated by the sun and the light and
What what
saying, oh,
what
yeah,
I was
saying,
what I
yeah,
meant was that dogs, they probably, again, there's no way for me to know that, but
yeah,
the dog doesn't think about what's going to happen tomorrow or they will remember what you did to them yesterday, how to treat them, but they don't
yeah.
plan for the future. They just live in the moment.
So I think what you're trying to say is how important it is for us to
Mhm.
live in the moment.
Absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
for synthesizing that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
98% of the things that I've worried about never happened. I think that's Mark Twain.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, there's a saying that says the real monster is in our head.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's really holding you back is the demons, the monster, whatever that you create in your
Yeah.
head.
Yeah. It's your attitude and your attention.
Yes, 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 yes. Wow. So many ways, like direction I can take this, but so how tough was it? How challenging was it for you to bounce back from one marriage to the next?
Ah,
And was it hard to do so? Or was it
yeah.
because of your upbringing, of you being so open to experiences, to life? As soon as, just like you mentioned, this story about that girl that you guys were getting along well, and your family
Yeah.
had to move, you left, and did that in some way help you and overcoming pretty fast, moving
I,
forward from a marriage?
I don't know, Damon, because I didn't have any other experience, but
Sure,
it's hard. It's very hard
absolutely,
to
yeah,
break up a relationship that you've been in for so long.
absolutely, yeah.
And so I allowed myself to grieve,
Hmm.
which was really important. And it took me months in many cases. Um, yeah, it's just really hard. So my
Wow.
second wife left me because an old boyfriend came back into her life and she
Mm,
wanted to go out with him. My third wife, same thing. I don't know what
okay.
my astrology is all about, but she was the Japanese interpreter. And when we were first falling in love and we were, you know, getting ready to go into a relationship, she told me about this man that she had met when she was in college and that she loved him madly and insanely, just like, I just love him. And if he ever comes back into my life, I'm going to have to live with him. And so I built a website called JapaneseInterpreter.com, and he found it and got in touch with
Oh
her. And she
no.
went off to Japan to live
Oh
with him.
wow. You shot yourself in the foot somewhere. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So, no, it's not. The last one, though, this was what was really amazing to me. I had learned in DC, I'd been teaching it for quite a few years when this relationship came to an end.
What's in DC?
On nonviolent communication.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's the most powerful language tool in the world. And so I drove from Vermont down here to New Mexico
Wow.
because at the time I was the information technology person for the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And on the way, I cried and cried and cried. I mourned, I laughed, I allowed myself uninterruptedly to just experience all the emotions of the breakup and to honor
Hmm.
and mourn in a very meaningful way. And by the time I got down here, the worst was over by far. What do you resist? Persist. So if I resist feeling bad about it, the worst, the worst is going to happen.
Hmm.
But if you
Wow.
surrender, then you learn the lesson and you're ready to go on.
Wow. Powerful. Do you still have that website, JapaneseInterpreter.com?
I don't know whether that's still up or
because
not.
that's a powerful premium domain.
Yeah,
Seriously, you can
I don't
monetize that
know.
very well, you know?
Well, she had it.
Or if you
I
still
don't
have
know.
it, you can flip it for a nice profit.
But I don't.
Oh,
I'm going to
okay.
look and see if it's still up here.
You can monetize so many ways.
Uh-huh. No, it's not there anymore.
Okay.
But she's retired, you know. She's now
Okay.
a client activist.
Okay. Wow. Powerful. Now, if you could go back and, well, that's a question that I ask at the end of the, I ask another series of rapid fire questions, but I can't help myself but asking that now. If you can go back to prior to getting married, let's say to an 18 or 20-year-old John at the time,
Uh-huh.
what's the number one piece of advice you would give to him, knowing all that you know now? Not just necessarily about marriage, but about everything you learned in life so
Okay.
far.
Yeah. So I would say forget everything you know and have been taught about marriage.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be the Disney movie. It's not going to be the House of Horrors. So give it all up. Forget about it. It's a unique person. No matter how many other relationships you have, you're never going to have a relationship like the one you have with that person. Pay attention to them. Don't argue. Empathize. And most importantly, know that everything that anybody does, they're doing in the service of their needs.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how tragic their strategy is, they're trying the best they can to make happiness in their life. So when you're listening to them and you think you might want to get mad at them, just try to guess what it is they're really looking for. Because if you find that and you both know what the need is that's not being met, you're going to find a solution to the issue unquestionably.
Beautiful. That was very powerful. Wow. See, that's what I was telling you. You have the experience that not many other people have because you've been not through one, through two, or three, but four marriages. So you've had four times the amount of practice. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's why you're an expert. You're a true expert, a true
Oh,
leader.
yeah, I could write a book on what not to do.
Oh, absolutely. A few books, I would say, not just a book,
Yeah.
You can write one book about each marriage and each lesson, all the lessons you learned, and.
I do plan on writing a play about each woman.
Oh, wow. That's going to be amazing. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Will they know about it, or you're just going to use some fictional names or
Oh,
fictional?
of course, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
And the great thing about being a playwright or fiction writer is you are under no obligation to be accurate about what really happened.
Absolutely. It's fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Are you still
yeah.
in touch
Take
with
the
them?
lessons. Um, so my first wife is still very angry with me because I left her. She, yeah, I don't need to talk about that.
Mm.
And the second wife, we are in touch with each other. The third, yes, we're close. That's where my two stepchildren are, and we still talk on Facebook.
That's a Japanese interpreter, right? The third
Yeah,
one?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. A little 4'2" uh, Jewish
Okay.
Jewish woman with full of life and fire, and we taught tantra together. We had a really great relationship. It was a lot of fun. And the last one, Georgina Forbes, a somewhat famous landscape artist out of Vermont. We still talk for hours from time to time.
That's good. That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah, all that work, you don't want to just throw it away.
Absolutely. No, no. It would be, again, I'm talking from a different perspective. I haven't been married, but each time I get into a relationship, I always look at ways to leave the other person better off than where they were before meeting me. So I never
I would
leave.
say,
I
yeah,
never leave in bad terms, or I've never been the kind of person to be dramatic or anything, making a scene. So I
Good for you.
always,
Yeah.
you know,
You hear that, lady? Ladies, pay attention.
yeah, no,
This is a
seriously.
manual on here.
Yeah. Because I'm not a dramatic person. I have zero tolerance for drama, and I make that very clear from the get go. Hey, I'm a zero tolerance guy for drama or play. If that sounds good, let's continue. If not, let's not waste
Yeah.
each other's time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, no, that's beautiful. Now, with all the things you learned from all of your in the on the field training and marriage and getting married with someone, if you were if the universe had in store for you another, who knows, maybe marriage in the store for you in the future, what is the one thing you would do to ensure that it will be successful? And by successful, I don't
Interesting.
mean long lasting, but it's going to be really
But
fun,
joyful.
fulfilling, yes, and happy.
Yes. Right. Okay. So I can answer that question.
Okay.
So the first thing I would do is I would be very diligent about setting up time,
Mm-hmm.
sometime every day and a couple of times a month that were just the two of us together doing things that we love. I would not bury myself in work. That's the breakup point for the last three relationships for sure. That's kind of what broke it up. I'm so busy working. And, I love my jobs. I love my work, especially the last one, 10 years talking to people who teach nonviolent communication all around the world. So it was very satisfying. But unfortunately, in that relationship, I would get up at 7:30. She'd get up around 11. I would be off at work at 9 or 10 o'clock. I would start moaning because I had to go home. But that's okay because I had a little tiny tablet that I would set up so that I could talk to trainers in Japan and Australia. And somehow she got tired of me. Duh.
Yeah,
So pay attention.
absolutely.
And this is the next one. Ask for what you want. Ask for what you want. So many people come to me and they're afraid to ask for what they want. Well, why are you afraid to ask for it? They might say no. What happens if they said no? I wouldn't get it. What happens if you don't ask for it? Oh, I'm not getting it.
That's a challenge. Yeah, it's a problem. Wow.
But people don't know how to ask,
Yes.
That's one of the things I teach. Really important to know how to make a request. It doesn't sound like a demand.
It's a perfect segue. Let's talk about what you're doing now, the business you're building, and the impact you're having in the world.
Okay. What would you like to know?
Whatever you want to tell me everything, So
Okay.
share whatever you want. You're the
A
star.
little history.
Yes, please.
So I'm a part of a religious science community, and one of the things they have are little groups that get together to support each other weekly.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this woman that was in our group. Her name was Patty. And every year she would say, "Oh, Marshall Rosenberg's coming." I have no idea who that was. You really have to meet him. He's a wonderful guy. Okay, Patty, I'll come. I have no intention of coming at all. So this went on for 3 years. In the fourth year, I am no longer traveling from one side of the globe to another, helping people set up groupware companies, big companies. It was a lot of fun. I got to spend a lot of money on my favorite hobby. But I'm tired because how many meals can you eat on an expense account? And so I decided to build a website. Okay, so a building company. So so that meant that I was free to my own schedule. And so I had a plan. I just started this business and I'm doing it with my wife. And so I'm going to go to the Arboretum in Seattle, beautiful building in this gorgeous park. I'm going to find the seat in that room that's closest to the exit door. And I'm going to get there early enough that I can get that seat. And during the first break, I make sure that Patty knows I'm there, and then I'm back to the office. Mm-hmm. 5 minutes into him talking, I knew that he had the best tool for peace that I ever conceived of.
Wow.
I had been very interested. I did active listening and reevaluative co-counseling and just anything that I could find about communication I studied, but this was the gold mine. And then 5 minutes after that, I knew I was totally not speaking in a way that resonated with who I am in my heart. So I jumped in. I built a website for him. Marshall would come to town, and the arrangement was he'd be there for a week, and we would pay all the expenses, and then any leftover money, we would split that 50-50 with the Center for Nonviolent Communication, and we deposited checks up to about $50,000. That meant for 2 or 3 weeks, we were spending all of our spare time depositing those checks. So I built a way for people to register and pay online. And so I was spent over 400 hours in Marshall's lectures, in his workshops. And I learned a lot, but where I really learned how to use the language was working together with 20 people that were trying to work together and use MDC. In the beginning, we would spend a weekend at somebody's house. We would be in meetings for like 17 hours. And at the end, we wouldn't have anything decided. But as we grew our skills and our understanding of the language, we would get together and somebody would say, well, this is what I'm proposing. Another person would say, well, what about belonging? Oh, well, we could modify that so that they could choose to belong. Okay, great. And in minutes, we could arrange a whole weekend because we were able to really communicate with this amazing tool.
Wow.
So 4 years after I met him, I started teaching it. And the most amazing thing about teaching, and it's always been this way for me, is that when I'm teaching, I find myself saying things I didn't know. I was talking to one of my current heroes, Sky Isaac Nelson, who's a physicist who studies synchronicity. And so he told me when I told him the story that I'm in the flow. So I'm doing what I'm built to do and what I'm here to do. And I just love it. One time I was talking to Marshall because he was in the air 300 days a year. I'd pick him up at the airport from New York and Seattle and take him straight to a class. And a week later, I'm taking him back to the airport and he's talking about where he's going to be in Texas the next day. And so I asked him one day, how can you do that? And he said, it's all about gratitude.
Wow.
He called it giraffe juice because that giraffe was his analogy for the language.
Like giraffe, like the animal?
Yeah, because it has the largest heart of a land mammal.
Oh, wow.
It has a high up neck, so it has this perspective. Yeah. And it thrives on the needles of the acacia tree.
Yes, very true. Wow.
So that was his, called it giraffe juice. And what do you mean by that, Marshall? Well, I come back to a place I've been before, and during the breaks, people line up to tell me how their life was impacted by what I was doing.
Wow.
And that is...
Isn't that the most beautiful, the most rewarding thing ever? Way more than any amount of money.
That is for sure. Yes, the greatest joy humans can experience is the joy of contributing to another person when you don't have to.
Yes.
Otherwise, our species would have been wiped out, right?
Yeah.
As an animal, we're pretty weak.
You know, for me, the two greatest rewards in business is one, the transformation I help people achieve by working with me, and two, the friendships and build the process. The money is icing on the cake. The money is not the cake. Some people make the mistake of making the money the cake, and that's where they, those kind of businesses don't last long.
No, I agree. No.
Wow, powerful.
When I was in Ireland, it took about poverty.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to shake it yet.
Yeah. Well, it's everything's an experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm going to die very happy.
And even when you say dying is not the end. It's just the transition to the next stage, the next phase. Just like at night, we retire, we sleep, and the morning you wake up with a brand new day ahead of you. Same thing here. Yeah.
I totally believe that. That experience I had as an infant gave me a clue to the fact that this is just a way station.
Oh yeah. I can talk a lot about that. And I actually, back in December, I had a wonderful lady, an actual hypnotherapist on my podcast. She did an actual past life reading, not a past life, what do you call it? The one where she goes in depth in person, but just like a reading, just asking my my energy.
Uh-huh.
It's on my YouTube channel if you want to watch it. Back
Sure.
in just before Christmas,
Uh-huh.
what we were supposed to talk for half an hour. We talked for 3 hours, and I only had to cut it because I had another call right after. Then I was almost on the verge of messaging the next person. Sorry, I can't make it something happen because it was so captivating talking to that lady.
Uh-huh.
I found out so many things about me that I had over 17,000 lives, and
Yeah.
coming from the Pleiades, and wow, amazing. I'm still blown away. I still watch it at least once a month. That's how
You
powerful
know.
that was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Not very
wow.
much in line with my current spiritual path.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's so much fun because once you learn about that, you realize that hey, it makes you look at life from a different perspective.
Yeah,
You
it
know
does.
that
Mhm.
growing old and dying is not the end. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's the next stage.
That stimulates something else I want to talk about with you just a
Sure.
little bit. I don't want to go too far off on this, but most Americans are terrified of death. And that,
Most people in the world. That's not just something, everybody
yeah,
in the world. Yes.
yeah, yeah. But my belief and understanding of American history
Hmm.
is that up until the mid 1800s, most people lived on farms in families where grandma and grandpa was there, and maybe two grandmas and two grandmas,
Multiple
uh,
generations. Yes.
multiple generations. So people experienced their grandparents dying. They were there with them. So it was very easy to realize that life is a cycle and we're born, we live, and we die.
Just
And
like the
when you don't
seasons in
have,
life, the season is
that's
spring,
abs-
summer, fall, winter. Absolutely.
no, but now it's a horrible tragedy that an 89-year-old person died. Whoa, what are you expecting?
Yeah. Alone in a nursing home, and the kids don't even bother visiting. No, absolutely not. No, no, no.
Yeah, yeah.
My father passed away on Monday this week. It's going to be his 1 year anniversary, and in his last year, it was out of the question to leave him in a nursing home. We wanted to keep him at home,
Mhm,
be with him, because
mhm.
he took care of us when we're young. Now it's our turn and duty and responsibility, at least from the way I was brought in and the way
Yeah, yeah.
I view things. That's
Uh-huh.
my duty to take care of him, and of
Yeah,
course my siblings helped, but no, I would have never considered putting my father in a
yeah,
nursing home.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I hope that our lives of all humans become more humane. And this catastrophe of the pandemic is waking people up
Big
about
time.
what's really important in life.
The blessing in
So,
disguise. Yes, we
yeah.
as a human species, in a way,
Hmm.
we needed that as a slap to wake up, to focus on what really
Yeah.
matters. It's not the latest technology. It's not getting a bigger house
Yeah.
or a newer phone or whatever. What matters is people,
That's right.
relationship, time, your health,
Yeah.
taking control of yourself.
Yeah.
So no, it was, as I said, there is a good in everything. And even in the pandemic, how horrible it's been, how tragic for a lot of people, businesses.
Uh-huh.
We in some ways, we needed that to wake us up.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. There's
So,
two things. There's two ways of looking at catastrophe that
mhm,
I think are really important. I don't know how to speak the language, but it's a Native American concept that in every crisis there is a solution.
absolutely.
And the Chinese, their kanji for crisis is catastrophe and opportunity. And what I get from from that one in particular, is that people don't like to change. So it takes a catastrophe for them to be willing to change. And then they can change for the better. They could change before, but why rock the boat if you're
Mhm,
drinking Mai Tais in the
yeah,
sauna?
absolutely. We need something drastic to shake us up, to wake us up, and
Mhm.
we need it. Yeah, and if you follow, well, one of the beautiful outcome as a result of that is there's been a resignation
Yeah.
wave, like 25% of the workforce in the US and the same thing in Canada have left their job because they realize, hey, if I can work, if a company is willing to pay me a good salary, it means I'm qualified, competent, and smart enough to do the same thing for myself. Plus, without having to do the commuting, without having to answer to some stupid boss or and while being at home, people have realized they can be much more productive working half the time being at home. For example, the last corporate job I had in Canada, we live in a small town outside of Toronto, like 50 kilometers. I had to go from here to downtown Toronto. It was taking me an hour and a half each way, 2 hours each way, and $30 just on commuting. I didn't have a car, but even if I want to have a car, it would be $1,000 a month. It was not feasible. It was said, you know what? And people are, especially now with the cost of gas, it's crazy. It's crazy. People have realized that a lot of things, hey, I can do things for myself. That's why a lot of people now are refusing to go back to the office.
Yes, I know. I love that. Yeah.
And the corporate companies are trying to hold on to, we need to build connection and bonding. No, it's all about control, and also because they have to justify the heavy, the high rents they're paying for these shiny offices. They have contracts for 5-6 years. They can't cancel those.
No, what they're gonna do? I tell her what to do with them. House the homeless.
Oh, that's a different. Oh, absolutely, that's a different. Beautiful. I agree. I'm with you.
Yeah.
And the U.S. and Canada and other countries, that's a real pandemic.
It is a catastrophe to happen.
Yes.
I bought this book just yesterday, and it's something about civil war. What conditions make a civil war? That's not the title.
You mentioned
something
that,
along
yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but for the people who are listening, they talked about the conditions, and there were two that really struck me. Mm-hmm. And one is when there's deep political divide.
Yes.
There's three. One is when there's a huge gap between the rich and the poor. And the third is when there's homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have a home, you've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
You might as well fight for your life. I'm not recommending people do that. I recommend politicians wake up and take care of some of these problems. Because we can do it. Solutions are at hand.
Absolutely. There's plenty of places available. Can't tell you how many houses, condos are sitting vacant just because some people bought it as an investment property and they refuse to rent it. And as a result of that, the rent goes crazy high and the locals cannot afford it.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing issue here in Canada. Absolutely.
So we have zoning laws that were appropriate maybe in the 1700s, that are just ridiculous now. I was in a house once in a neighborhood that had been kind of a middle-class resort area on Lake Washington, and the house burned down. And houses were selling at that time for about $70,000, $80,000, but the price of the lot was $50,000 after the house had burned down. So the person who bought the lot had to build a house for $200,000 because the banks wouldn't lend but 75% more than the value of the lot.
Wow. Talk about the racket.
It's called being stuck to conditions that were appropriate centuries or decades at least earlier that make no sense now.
These banks are very rigid. They're very, things move fast, but for them to move, it takes, once again, something drastic like a pandemic.
Yeah. And then also there's zoning codes. Just anyway, enough of that.
Wow, so much that we covered and so much we can cover as well. Listen, there's so much more we can cover, but let's call it. Let's take a break now and do a part 2 in a week or so.
Okay.
I have to jump off now, but listen, absolutely phenomenal talking to you. I am so glad we connected, and we started exchanging that message a few days ago to schedule this. This will be the start of a ongoing series of podcasts because there's so much more we can dive into and cover, and I'm telling you, Pan, John, you're a wealth of knowledge, your wisdom, you're a gift to the world. And now you're in the position to share this gift with the world. Now you're at the stage that you have this beautiful responsibility, impactful responsibility in your hands.
Yeah.
Now take it by the horns and share it with the world. That's
Well,
a beautiful stage that you're in.
Yeah, that's where I am, and it's what I love to do.
Absolutely. It's all about impact. Like just like you said, I love that the way you framed it. Capitalism with a soul,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
business with a heart, a business the God's way, whatever you want to call it.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's doing good. Do good with your business. The more
Yeah.
good you do, the more fulfilling it will be, the more fun it will be. And as a result of that, you will
Yeah.
make more money as well.
Yeah.
Because when you focus on impact, the money's going to take care of itself magically.
That's right. That's right.
So listen,
Hey, this is the most fun I've had in a long time. I really enjoyed our conversation, enjoyed getting to know you so much better.
pleasure's all mine. I can't wait till we can have those conversations in real over a beautiful glass of wine and
Yeah.
steak in the near future under the stars, the Milky Way and all that would be beautiful. But until then, I salute you, my brother. You're a true leader with a heart. Keep shining your light. Keep blessing the world with your presence, with your gift, with the impact, with everything you're doing. Stay safe. Stay awesome. God bless you. I salute you.
All right. And I salute back, and thanks again.
You're very welcome.
This
Take
has
care.
been
Bye-bye.
fun. Bye-bye.